All right, this is Listen to Tony with me, Anthony Olensky. Today's guest is Roman Engeler. So he has a master in robotics, systems, and control from ETH Zurich with exchanges at Stanford and Imperial College London. He competed in a number of machine learning competitions and hackathons around natural language processing. And also was a product manager at Scale Up and Corporate Venture Studios, like in mental health, sustainability, fintech. And currently, from what I understood, you're interested in working in leveraging data and advancements in AI to address the mental health crisis. Probably also shifted back and forth. But before we jump into what you want to build in AI and all the topics, we had lunch like a week or 2 weeks ago, and effective altruism came up.
Yes.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about that at the very beginning. What is effective altruism? And I guess like FBX was like a big, right? Sam Bankman-Fried was like a big personality in that area. So, and I'm also curious, what's your take on that?
Sure. So I like to introduce effective altruism by dissecting the word. So it's like altruism is about doing good, and the effective is like how can you do it effectively. So given you have constraints on resources, be it time, money, whatever, how can you maximize the good you are doing? And this can be like very different things. It can range from donating, so you want to donate money, like which is the most effective charity that does the most good with the money, so who should you give it to?
How do you know?
There are by now kind of research services. So GiveWell would be one, and they try to rank charities. So they have some metrics they defined, and then they rank the charities on like given $1 spent, what's the difference in this metric they are doing, and with that they give you kind of an indication on where your money is put wisely if you want to have an impact.
So the goal is to get as rich as possible and then donate as much of that money to charitable causes that could, because just also knowing a little bit of the story of Sam Bankman-Fried and like his take on effective altruism. Are you on the same page as he is, or is that because there's also the question of utilitarianism and how can you max it out in terms of your talents and capabilities? It's also almost as if like Calvinist / Protestant, the Protestant ethic of like, God put you on this planet or whatever. You're giving this like talents. You have to really work hard because you've been given this. Don't fuck it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I think the route he has taken is one potential route. You could reason about that. It makes sense to take that. But I'm more in. Like kind of the donation is one part, but the other part is, or the other big capital we have as humans is like our time and what we want to work on. And I think I'm more in that direction trying to optimize that. So with my career, I think I can have a big impact, like by deciding on what I want to work on, which field I want to advance. And I'm more trying to optimize for that. So how can I do the most good with my career?
So it's not only about finance, it's also about like, don't pick a job that's not important for the planet. Like, I don't like a bullshit job. Like, I don't know, like maybe I don't want to discredit any any type of vocation, but there are certain jobs that you can just do just in order to get a paycheck. And it's maybe a cushy corporate job, but you're saying you kind of want to take the harder route. That being said, and say like you're a high schooler, how do you incorporate that into your life decisions?
Like I think it also, so what is also an important factor in kind of in this equation is what are you passionate about? Because I assume like if you are passionate about something, you are more willing to put also more energy and drive into it. So I think it should be a bit based on that. Like if you, let's say, have a computer science background, then it's probably another career path. Like if you want to optimize for career and impact, it's probably another path that you take than if you have studied philosophy or psychology or social sciences.
So it's you take that into consideration after you've picked the things that you want to study in terms of your passion. So it's first passion in terms of like what gets your mind spinning, and then what job can you take that has the highest impact on society. Is that kind of it?
For me, it was that way around.
Okay.
Sure, there are other ways to do it. There's also 80,000 hours, which is I think it started with a book.
Yeah.
So the premise behind is like they calculated that as an average human working, you have like 80,000 hours that you spend on your career. How can you maximize it? Now there's a whole organization built with the name around that helps people in like career advice. They have like a lot of resources to help you evaluate different options, guide you through the thinking process. They also offer one-on-one coaching. That could also be an approach. But for me, it was really first passion. And also because I got later on in the movement, like after kind of towards the end of my studies.
How did you get involved in the movement?
By coincidence. So like, going back to my childhood, like I grew up with 3 siblings, so in a big family, and I think I learned there that like it's not only about me, it's like about us. So really so I was the oldest. I think that shaped me quite a lot to also look out for the others, to sometimes put back my desires like for someone else. So I think that planted this.
I'm a middle child, so I don't know how that is. I had a younger brother, so I can comprehend what you're talking about. But so you're kind of almost like there's the mom and the dad, right? But then,
Yeah. I mean, for sure, there have been situations where I was like, where we went, let's say, to a public swimming pool, and then when I was old enough, my mom said, now you are responsible for your siblings. I pick you up in 3 hours. So I think I learned from a young age on that. Like,
you could have gone both ways. You could have bullied them and just left them.
Yes. I mean, I'm not excluding that sometimes it was like that.
Yeah.
But I think that's typical, like in your childhood. But also quite a few times I took on responsibility. Yeah.
And then so from there, you kind of felt like, okay, there's something more to just my individual wants and needs. And then when you say the movement, because altruism is just like a term, like, you say, this was very altruistic on your side. You bought me a coffee, or like you brought me something, or you asked me a question that actually, like, how was your day, and you actually cared. I mean that's not the best example of altruism, but what does effective mean in altruism? Because say most of us are trying to be altruistic / like good, lack of self-interest, but is effective altruism kind of helping substantiate the fact that you have to be a little bit self-interested to get to the altruistic part?
Like how I see this, or I think how it comes into in my case is when you do deliberate choices. I mean, yes, you can be altruistic. I mean, like if someone tries to catch the metro with a child, and then I hold the door open so that they catch the metro, I think that's altruistic, but that's at least more like just my nature and not so deliberate. But if I, for example, with the career, I mean, it's like very deliberately I'm thinking of, okay, like what am I passionate about and where can I have an impact, and then do the deliberate choices of joining Entrepreneur first, because I've seen that, at least for now, the way I can maximize my impact.
Got it. So you figure out your passion, you're leaving home, high school, your siblings behind, and you're pursuing computer science. Was that because I assume you enjoyed math / like just natural sciences? At what point did you have to start thinking, or did you start thinking about how can I make this part of my just living versus just I'm interested, I'm going to follow this, I'm going to go to college, study it, and then I'm going to figure things out? Because you said you got involved at the end of your studies in the movement, so maybe in the beginning wasn't that much part of like your decision making. It was just like, I'm studying this, I'm curious, I'm developing myself, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think in the beginning it was more like that. Like I also started studying mechanical engineering, focusing on combustion in gas turbines and rocket engines. Like, still like super fascinating rocket engines.
Yeah.
But I mean, combustion is like somehow
Do you actually
something
get to build
daunting.
these engines when you're studying? Like, what does it mean to study rocket science? Like, do you watch a lot of like SpaceX videos about like how they're doing things and trying to replicate that, or?
No, I was more on the kind of theoretical or simulation side.
Mm.
So, like, interesting side story. So, combustion is not that stable as people think it is. Like, it's quite hard to control it. And also, like in the moon program, they had problems with instabilities in the combustion process in the engines.
Combustion processes when fuel gets burned and to produce energy to just get the rocket off the.
I think how you can imagine it is like, I mean, a candle. It's like flickering slightly, so it's not very stable. And if you have now like a very, very powerful flame, this flickering that gives like pressure waves that travel away. And then, I mean, it's like in a kind of a compartment. So there's like an echo or a reflection from the walls, which again influence the flame and how it flickers. And there you can have like a feedback cycle, and it can get very dramatic. And yeah, in the space program or in the moon program, it led to like they did, I think, like 2,000 full scale tests until they figured out on how they make sure that the rocket engine doesn't blow up. And like that's something you probably cannot do anymore today because it's too expensive. But there, because there was the race with Russia, they were willing to invest that money, but it was like insane what they put in engineering efforts and money to build these things and to fire the rockets.
Kind of crazy that they used to do these like literally moonshots, right? Like, and now we have way more technological capability. Also, there's a lot of money, and it's just like the internet, like the sharing of knowledge. Why the fuck are we doing more, or like why are we doing less than we used to? That's like,
yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I'm still amazed by, like, I think the real achievement in this, or like one of the real achievements there, was really the coordination of like so many different parts going towards one goal. And there's like one story that I think Kennedy told is that like he went to see the facilities, and then he asked, like, there was one guy cleaning the floor.
Who said it again? Your professor?
The Kennedy, the president.
Oh, okay.
Then he asked like one guy cleaning the floor, like, yeah, what are you doing here? And he said, like, I'm helping to go to the moon.
Yeah.
And I think that pictures very well like everyone.
The janitor.
Yeah, like from the janitor until like the president and the researcher, everyone was like super aligned on the goal. And yeah, I think I haven't seen any comparable like big alignment, joint initiatives.
How did they motivate you, or how did you motivate yourself when you're studying rocket science? And like, did they tell you like you're gonna build the next space program for Europe or the world, or you're gonna get the Swiss people to space? Was that part any?
I think it was it was more intrinsically. They never told us that. Like at ETH, there wasn't also any classes really on rocket engines per se. But in the end, it boils down to like fluid dynamics. Fluid dynamics, the equations they hold if you are in a rocket engine, or if you are like watching airflow over a car or in a turbine. So there's like fluid dynamics, there is combustion, there's some like computational methods classes, and yeah, took kind of these classes, and then I think more by coincidence somehow managed to get into the rocket field. Yeah.
And did you, when you said you got into the rocket field from the just mechanical engineering, focus on the combustion systems, to what extent did you pursue that? Or like, what does it mean to get into rocket science?
Yeah, so I think how the path was for me, so I was at Imperial College at that time, still focusing on turbines and working on, it's called like low order modeling of the combustion process. So you try to kind of derive a systemic view, like with formulas on how the combustion process works and interacts with the walls and how different factors have an influence, which allows you to study very fast or iterate very fast on things you want to try out. Like if you want to change, let's say, the length of the combustion chamber and see what kind of effect does this have to the on the stability of the process. You don't need to first like build the chamber and run it, but you can just with low order modeling find out if it's like going in the right direction. Like it's like prototyping, and then you build
Like
MVP
on a computer.
Yeah, on a computer.
Yeah.
And then you build an MVP, which also still is on a computer. Like you have then computational fluid dynamics where you simulate the combustion, and then also once this works out, then you go to like build the real thing and test it. Yeah. So I did this work in Imperial, and then I was looking around mostly at like turbine manufacturers like Rolls-Royce and General Electrics, and then by coincidence stumbled upon the German Aerospace Center, and I've seen that they do research on rocket engines.
With Airbus?
In some cases, yes, but also sometimes like independent research. Yeah, and then I applied there, and they were like really interested in what I've been working on because they also wanted to do something similar. And then I ended up going to Lamboltshausen, like it's a small city in the south of Germany, and also witnessed like one upper stage rocket engine test that was like super fascinating, like hearing and feeling it, like all the air is shaking.
Is it like on the videos on YouTube where like was it actually testing? It was just the engine. It wasn't the rocket. Also,
it was the engine. Yeah.
Okay, so was it like in a big hangar when they just fired it up?
Yeah, so they also have the testing facilities for like really the main engine of the German rocket, and there you can actually like see the flame. But for the upper stage, there the tricky thing is like they want to reconstruct the conditions in which it's operating. So it's like very high in the atmosphere, like almost zero pressure. So they need to somehow create the same environment. So what they do in essence, like they build a tunnel, and they use kind of 4 smaller rocket engines to suck the air out of the tunnel that you have like vacuum condition.
Okay.
And then they fire like the actual one into this vacuum chamber. So you don't see the flames.
Why is it important to fire it in a vacuum chamber?
Because it's the same conditions as it has
Okay.
in the altitude, and you want to reconstruct that to see like is the process stable, how does it behave under these conditions, how fast can we build up thrust and reduce it again.
Now, did you apply there and go work there before or after you started thinking about this effective altruism path?
Before.
Okay.
Yeah, I think effective altruism came then. So after that, like I've seen. Yeah, I mean,
it's a weird place to end up when you're like in your early 20s. You just finished college and you go to some small town in southern Germany. How was that?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience.
Were you just living with the people who you're working with, like going basically stuck in the... Was it like a big research center when they have also like some accommodation for the employees, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah,
they would organize accommodation, but I looked for one myself. But then, yes, exactly, it was this research establishments. They were like, I think we were 10 or 15 kind of interns there. So we had also our own kind of office space, and we would hang out on the weekends and in the evenings. So there was a community given from there. Yeah, I think that made it way easier, because it's a nowhere. Like you need to be far away from bigger cities to do these tests, because it's like, I mean, it can blow up in the worst case. So it was like somewhere in the forest. So you were driving first like on the main road for like 20 minutes from the city, and then like 15 minutes just into a forest. Like there's nothing else around, and there then at some point you've seen the testing facilities.
Is it surrounded by the military, and there are like a lot of checkpoints for you to get in, or not really?
I mean, there was like a big fence around with like cameras. There was like, entry checkpoints where you needed like to pass by security checks.
Do you ever go out in like a bigger city and then take a cab back, like completely fucked up, or like biking back from the club, and it's like, you want to get in?
Luckily not. Things would not have turned out that good.
Yeah, right. Okay, so you're an intern there. You're testing rocket engines. You're kind of set. Like, you could probably be a researcher there for like 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Get a hefty salary and enjoy it. And also maybe do some cool discoveries around rocket science.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened? Because you were here, you're not there.
Yeah. I think also during that time I got a bit disillusioned by the European space program. So it's like super fragmented. like ESA is super fragmented.
There are like 27 countries in there.
Yeah,
right?
there are a lot of different countries paying in there. As far as I remember, it was then also like the fraction you paid in, kind of the same fraction of labor needed to be performed in your country, which led to like a lot of inefficiency and administration overhead. Also very cautious security-wise. Like, I understand, like, it's very dangerous and you need to be cautious. But if you want to advance something, like, risk is equal opportunity. You should take it deliberately, but you have to take risks. And
you said risk is equal opportunity?
I mean, where there's risk, there's usually, or like where there's an opportunity, there's risk, or the other way around, something like that. Yeah. And I've just like seen on what is happening in the US with SpaceX, etc. They were like much more like trial and error, like sure, thinking things through, but then also at some point saying, now we try it. And I mean, if it blows up, we just make sure it's like far away from everyone, it doesn't hurt. And they were much faster in iterating. But you cannot, like, it's advanced weapon technology, space flight. So you can, if you are not US citizen, you cannot work there. I think not even as, I'm not sure about if you're a contractor, but you cannot work as a European in SpaceX.
So you felt like your hands are tied and
Yes.
you're dependent on the European Space Agency, so better get out of that field.
Yeah. And I was already back there very interested in the human mind. Like, that's also what brought me in the end to artificial intelligence. Like, I was super interested in like, how does the human mind work? How does consciousness work? But given my technical background...
Did you watch The Sixth Sense?
Sorry?
Did you watch The Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis?
No, not yet.
Oh, you gotta see it, man.
Okay.
It's like not necessarily how, but it's I'm not gonna spoil it, but yeah, watch it.
Okay.
Something that inspired you, or some book about like, because we all think, right? Like, we all have brains, but we don't really. Not everyone, or most people wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm interested how the human mind works." So I was curious, like, what kind of got you there? Yeah,
I think my experience in military, because like it was
true. Like, you were, yeah.
Somehow I developed there. So military is compulsory in Switzerland, right? Like every male theoretically needs to go. And there I got like really interested in observing people in this out of the comfort zone situation. And I think especially like one moment that sticked in my head was, so we had an endurance week. So I'm lieutenant, so I did like additional training and stuff. And
what are the ranks again? What it's like, the lieutenant is like kind of the mid rank, or?
So it's like, I mean, you have kind of different soldier ranks. Like, if a soldier is good, they can also get different ranks. And then you have kind of the group leader ranks. They are like intermediate, and they do like directly lead the people in the field.
On the ground, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have like the first higher rank is kind of lieutenant, where you have like 3-4 group leaders, and then like 20, 30, 40 different soldiers.
All right.
And that's where I am. And the training is quite interesting, but also very tough. Like, you learn a lot about your limits, physically, psychologically. So they also put you in a situation. Like, in the endurance week, they also wouldn't tell us. We had no idea what was the program. So we didn't have food for the first 2 days. We couldn't sleep for the first 2 days. And they didn't tell us, like, when can you eat or sleep again. So that's, like, a lot of psychological...
Could you hunt, or like, were you put in a what environment were you put in? Like, were you in the forests, or?
Yeah, mainly in the forest. So we needed to do different exercises. Like, first, I think like running for 20 kilometers, then like riding a bike, then solving some exercises, and like repeating and different orders of these things. So it puts you on a lot of psychological strain. And then it gets very interesting to observe like how people become under these conditions. Especially like the moment that stick to me is then, I think on the third day in the morning we get breakfast. And like, I mean, I knew that...
Was it good? Was it like granola and bananas?
Yeah, I think it was like half a banana and some oatmeal, like very, like only like very little. But so I knew the people for like 10 weeks, like very closely. Like we literally spent 17, 18 hours awake together and then sleeping in the same room, so very well. But there, like, was very interesting to see how people behave, how they started skipping the line just because they thought they are it's more important that they get food than the others. And for me, that was kind of insane because, like, I knew they're not letting us starve, like for sure not in Switzerland, right? They give food for everyone. So yeah, why skip the line? I mean, yeah, I couldn't understand.
Instincts, huh?
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
Did anyone, apart from like skipping in line, was there any other like some people started, bullying someone or become like go like crazy? Also, did people leave like mid-program or like the midweek they just gave up because they couldn't handle it?
So I think what happened is that people got kind of less understanding towards one another and sharper. So sometimes, so how it would work is that they just took someone from the class and said, now for the next exercise, you are the leader, you have to coordinate everyone. And people seem to be less collaborative or like more than also like verbally attacking the other person, like, yeah, why do you do it that way? You should have done it differently. So that's one thing that happened. And to the question, like if someone gave up, I think there were like 2 cases where people gave up but due to physical issues. So like they got like super bad diarrhea. And there it was like it was winter, like it was minus degrees outside, and then it was like dangerous to continue like that. But apart from that, like everyone continued and finished it.
How did you act in these circumstances? Did you see any changes in your just personality / instincts? You're a very calm person and like a nice guy. I don't see you being like suddenly just blowing up, being angry or an asshole or losing kind of your shit and just.
Yeah, I think I really stayed calm. Like, I mean, I had this, like I was observing the others. So I was like well aware of like what's going on, and I made my reasoning about like there will be food for everyone, and so I stayed calmer than many people.
But everyone knew this though, right? Like, why do you think you were so rational about this?
It's a good, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's unclear why the others behaved the way they behaved. Still. Yeah, and then I had like
so you can extrapolate to just the whole world. Like, why do people behave in certain ways? Where like, like like we're all human.
Yeah.
Know exactly what's going on this planet. That everyone has their own hardships, problems. Yet, like, you hear stories from now and then, like someone cutting the line at the airport, saying, "You know who I am," just like doing these like ridiculous things, and it's like, do you even realize that I know, like, I can understand like what you're saying, and like you sound like an asshole, or act like it, or like where's your self-awareness, or where's so interesting. But anyway.
Not sure if it's due to how you have been raised or education or your immediate environment.
Read books? Do you read a lot of books?
Yeah, I mean a bit like in cycles. So it depends a bit. Like if I have to read a lot during my work, for example. So if I read a lot of paper, then I don't have the energy to read books in the evening. But yeah, I generally like to read books on like quite different subjects. Yeah, and listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos.
What's your go-to YouTube channel?
So podcast-wise, I'm currently listening a lot to Andrew Huberman podcasts.
Oh yeah, Dr. Andrew.
Yeah, because like it's super interesting. I mean, I'm super interested in the mind, and he explains a lot of things from the neuroscience angle on like what's happening in the mind, how does the dopamine system works and stuff. So I really like that. YouTube, like what I watch on YouTube, usually people I admire and to see how they think and how they have changed. So I like to watch especially like videos of, let's say, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, but when they were like very early on in their career, because there I feel like their views were the purest. I mean, also the least kind of shaped and formed through society and giving hundreds of talks, but like really the very pure view.
That's a good point.
And I really like to see that, but then also the transformation, and that's super inspiring.
Got it. I guess that's also, I mean, that's part of the reason why we're talking, or why I'm doing these podcasts, because for me it's very interesting having access to like, people who want to be entrepreneurs, or like not yet, but they might build something. What are their thoughts on the world, society, and the problems they're trying to deal with and solve at a very early stage. So going back to the military and like in artificial intelligence, and you getting interested in how the human mind works. So you finished the 1 week of hell, I guess. And what was the first step? How do you even start like getting properly into the weeds of like how the mind works, and then entering the area of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I think so. Really getting properly into it. So I started reading towards the end of my bachelor's kind of lecture notes around machine learning classes. So just like even classes that were not accessible back then to me, I just like downloaded the script and started using it. And then then I think after this internship at the German Aerospace Center, I thought, I'm super interested in the mind. Like I've now read a few lecture notes on machine learning classes. Sounds still super interesting. Let's try it out. And I think there I got then properly into all like the mathematics and concepts behind artificial intelligence. Yeah. And then like I even first started my master's in mechanical engineering with a focus on energy flows and processes.
So more like rocket science stuff.
Yeah. But then on the side started to take a few classes in like machine learning, deep learning, and then at one point said, that's what I want to do. So I switched, didn't complete the other program, switched the program.
All right, like back to the basics. Difference, like what is machine learning, deep learning? What are they?
So I think like that's not my definition. I don't claim that it's correct, but I think like kind of the biggest circle is artificial intelligence, and there like a lot of things go in. Like machine learning is a part in it, but there's also what people called expert systems, so where they tried to put the knowledge of experts in kind of decision trees. So they ask an expert like you did now this decision, like what were the factors, how did you what were the factors that you ask yourself, yes, no, yes, no, until you get to the decision. That then didn't work out. That was one of the AI winters. And then at some point machine learning came up, which like also things like linear regression and k-means clustering, like more, let's say, basic concepts that you would have called statistics or mathematics before would fall into machine learning. And then deep learning is yet another subpart of machine learning that is really focused on, or like inspired by the brain with these neural networks. So like, they thought about like how does the human mind work? Like they're neurons, they're connected somehow to each other. Cool, let's build it artificially. And that are like deep networks. And that's where like deep learning comes from.
Okay. And so in order to be an expert in deep learning, you need to be an expert in ML and AI, or not necessarily?
So a lot of concepts are shared between those. So like if you learn about deep learning, you learn a lot about machine learning as well. And vice versa, like if you do machine learning, you also learn a lot of concepts that are afterwards useful in deep learning. And I think generally you start with machine learning, like kind of building the basics. This is also the older literature, like this has been around for longer, and then you go towards deep learning.
Okay, so you started studying this stuff.
Yes.
You started machine learning, then deep learning, because machine learning being the basics, and like there's already a lot of literature about this. What kind of assignments do you have when you are studying stuff like this, or you know what I mean? Like build like a mini brain, or like how do you become proficient in this field?
Yeah, I think in the early, like more the fundamental classes, it was like more abstract problems you needed to solve. So like given you have a few input variables, predict an output variable. And then or like clustering, like you have, let's say, a person with specific attributes. Now try to cluster them and see if you see like specific clusters and why they form. And then like in the in the, let's say, intermediate classes, then it was also sometimes, hey, here you have some like medical scans of a lung. Now classify if someone has cancer or not. That was one assignment that I remember. And then in the more advanced classes, yeah, you build a really like deep learning system. So in one class, there was a team project where we did like, there's one problem of kind of identifying objects in a picture.
Mm.
And another problem somehow to find features that are useful to detect the object. So we kind of build a system that learns both things in parallel. That was one thing. I also did some like smaller research project on my own in a lab that was on imitation learning. So the goal was like you have a ground robot that needs to navigate somewhere. Like, how do you teach that? And how what we did, or like what one approach is, like you have kind of an expert, can be a human that shows, I would take like this path to that way, to that goal, and you show him like hundreds, thousands of paths, and then you let it run by itself, and you minimize kind of the distance between the path it has taken versus the path the human or the expert would have taken. And by that, you get closer and closer, and at some point, you hope you can abstract kind of the knowledge, implicitly the knowledge, like why you have taken or what is the best path, and then it can, in a new environment, find the best path on its own.
So you feed it like, you allow it to do like hundreds of thousands of tests.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that it's going to outsmart the human in terms of finding. The more like, then you also maybe increase the complexity of the model, and then it's going to potentially find the path that's like most optimal in a very quick way.
Yes.
Very quickly. Compared to a human, we have to like look at, okay, here.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Although I would be careful with outsmart in that. I mean, outsmart, yes, it's faster. But if you learn directly from an expert, I guess you could outsmart it. But usually, I think also what happens often for humans, like if you have an expert that you're learning for, it's like hard to get better than the expert because you kind of only have the knowledge they have. And I think then what was the next step from imitation learning is like really reinforcement learning. So what they did with AlphaGo, for example, where you or with the Atari games, so you only specify the rules of the game, and then you just let it play by itself or versus itself.
AlphaGo is the
Go player.
The Go player that won, like beat the human champion.
Yeah.
And kind of proved in like what 20. There's like a whole documentary on this on YouTube.
Yeah.
Right? Like in 2018, like there was like the first proof that computers can outsmart or like win in such a complex game and beat the human mind. Now you mentioned this, like, so basically trying is really important, but we don't have enough time to try all the different things that we'd like to try as humans, or fail enough times to become our best selves. Because from what I understood, like, this model can try thousands of different routes in probably milliseconds, just depending on the computing power, and then it finds the right one. But it doesn't know, and like, I think that's why. Okay, now it all makes sense. I just like insight on like it's probably way harder for us. That's why it's just like important to try as much as possible, because by definition you're gonna become better because you've found, or you've at least identified all the things that are not gonna work versus work.
And we are somehow also sometimes stuck. Like, I mean, we are very much influenced by what other people's tried or did. Like, I assume also in Go, I mean, there have been like grand champions before, and they had like ways of how to play, and we, like, it's kind of a local optimum, and we like stay close to it. But what these systems, if you only give them the rules and no like other input, like not like what an expert would do, then there's also a chance that they explore like completely different ways of doing things. And I think there was like one famous move, I don't remember which number, that was like experts were like super surprised that the AI did this move in the Go game. And they thought at that time that it was like a wrong move, or that maybe now it loses due to that move, but in the long term, like it played out well, and it won due to that. Just because we never seen that, like no one else probably tried that before.
And probably also having the foresight or being able to compute what's going to happen in the future and like predict it to an extent. But do we have that mental capacity? Like going back to being interested in like the human brain, have you reached the limits of how innovative we are? Like what can we do with the human brain? And that's why these efforts to develop artificial intelligence are so important, because that's going to allow us to take the next step in our evolution.
Yeah, interesting question, and the answer probably also philosophical. Like I think
from what you see, right?
Yeah. I mean, the human brain is still unique in like how efficient it is and how generally capable it is. Like I mean, also with this example like of AlphaGo or other current AI systems that are like very good, but usually in a very narrow domain. Like they're good at playing Go, but they could not really do anything. Like they could not play chess, or they're very good in large language model in producing language, but like they wouldn't know what to do with an image. So it's still like very narrow, and we have like this general capability in like very different domains to succeed, to also like very fast learn something new. I mean, I could bring a new game and quickly explain it to you, and you would very fast grasp the concepts behind it. I think that's still like a unique advantage that we as humans have. But yeah, I think going forward, like at some point, I assume we reach it with AI. And then I guess it could take two ways. Like either like AI gets smarter and we use it like as co-pilot or somehow to assist it, or like as an independent entity to act in the world, or we go a path like brain-computer interfaces. We try to somehow merge the advances or the advantages that an AI has with us. I mean, like we have limited kind of memory.
Chips into
Neuralink, what they do. So you try, for example, to augment memory, because that's a limitation, or some things like. I mean, what's super useful is, for example, search. Sometimes you don't know the answer, but you could easily find it on Google. So why not make a connection between our
Google and your brain
and a search engine? It doesn't need to be a search or a database, and then if you don't know something, you can very quickly look it up, and you have much more knowledge.
Have you seen Limitless?
No, I don't think. I'm not too.
You would enjoy it, man. It's like a 2011 movie with I think it's Bradley Cooper and like Robert De Niro, and this basically it's this guy who's a writer who's been exposed to a lot of things by nature of being a writer, and just reading also a bunch of different novels, and I don't know, like having a liberal arts education, but he's a bum. Like he cannot start like writing his own book. He's struggling, and then he's exposed or given this pill by some like friend of a friend or whatever. And it's like the limitless pill, where the premise is that, you know, they say like we only use 10% of our brain. So you take that pill and you use 100% of it, and he becomes kind of limitless. Like he learns languages in like one day, and becomes like it becomes complicated because it's like a big pharma drug, whatever. Cool movie though. I think you'd enjoy it in terms of like the connection with like AI. But actually, I also wanted to ask you, like, do we actually use 10% of our brain? And like, or is that bullshit?
Now we go outside of my domain of expertise.
Okay.
I mean, like, I think the first thing I'm not sure to answer that is, like, at least what I heard from listening to this Andrew Huberman podcast, and also I watched a talk of the head of neuroscience at DeepMind, and he also said, like, there's still a big debate in the community if we have like really localized centers in the brain for specific things, like a speech center, motoric center, like, but it's somehow encapsulated, or if it's more like a big mush and like everything somehow does everything. I mean, if it's like the first one that you have these specific centers, then it makes sense that you only use a limited capacity, because like if you have a visual center and you process something visually, like of course not the hearing center gets used, but if you have like this big mush, then maybe it's possible that we could use more.
Fair, but again, it's as you said, it's outside of expert.
It's,
I'm not going to push you on this.
Yeah.
But you're graduate student. I guess at what point does this effective altruism and like you kind of starting to build something on your own come into play?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So during COVID or the beginning of COVID, I read Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom,
Okay.
which is like this book on like what are potential paths to an artificial general intelligence, how like what are the different scenarios and how fast it could go, and also what are the consequences or what could go wrong. And I think that was then for the first time that I really get exposed with this artificial intelligence safety field. And then soon after that, I read the Precipice by I think Toby Ord about like how humanity could end. So very interesting. He really tries to list
How
the existential risk. Like there are many things like super volcano, big asteroid crashing on the Earth, pandemics, engineered pandemics, but also artificial general intelligence.
Okay, so he doesn't have like one hypothesis that.
No, he really starts to like list them all out, and he also tries to give like probability bounds on those.
Okay.
Like I think these needs to be read carefully. Like he talked to in each of the fields to experts to try to derive that, but still, I mean, it's like predictions and a bit vague, but could give you an indication on the order of magnitude on like they compare to each other. And so I think the main takeaway is that like artificial general intelligence is probably the biggest existential risk that humanity can face. Like if that goes wrong and we create something that is like way smarter, better than us, but for some reason doesn't like us or doesn't want to have us around, could be quite critical. Yeah. And I think that got me then interested in this topic. And then by coincidence on a kind of entrepreneurial weekend where there were some serial entrepreneurs telling us a bit like how they did it, what they did, and run us through the process. They had told someone that I'm very interested in this field, and he said, there's this movement called effective altruism, and they exactly discuss this topic. Maybe you should look into that. By that I got into the movement.
Okay, so it was mainly because you were interested in AI and you thought this is a good lever for you to be more embedded in the field versus just actually believing in the mission itself at the beginning. Okay. Yeah. And you mentioned it's like 80,000 hours. Is it like you're working 40 hours per week for like 52 weeks per year, and then you have like 40 years of work, and that amounts to 88?
Yeah.
Are you actively counting your hours?
No. No. I'm not tracking too much actually. Yeah. I mean, about the Nora ring, but also there I didn't look too much into the data. So I just
what is a Nora ring?
Aura ring. So it's like measuring heart rate, sleep pattern, oxygen level in the blood, movement, and then it gives you some statistics and time evolution of sleep quality and activity scores. And I bought it because I tend to wake up a couple of times during the night, so I wanted to monitor that more closely to see if there's any pattern
just like
there.
that, or nightmares, or
just like that. I don't know. Like, especially if I'm stressed, then it's a bit more. Then I wake up more regularly. Yeah.
Okay.
But apparently I learned. So I talked recently to a friend of mine who studied psychology, is now on the path to being a psychotherapist, and she said, like, that's normal. Like, everyone wakes up in the night, but so if I recall it correctly, because it's like dark in the room, so you wake up and it's dark in the room, so there's no sensation. So it's kind of not memorable for the brain. That's why most people don't know it the next day that they woke up in the night. But it's actually very common that you...
No shit. So I wanted to say, like, I don't really wake up during the night, but maybe I do. I just don't realize it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what she told me. Yeah.
Huh. I'm going to record myself. See if my eyelids are open. Okay, so you got, like, you're getting, like, you finally found a thing that you're really into, how the mind works, AI, and then someone like tells you, listen, there's a whole group of people who are working just on this, or like are really into it. How do you reach out to them? Do you just go on the effectivealtruism.com and you find a number and call them like, hey, I want to be part of this? Or
I think I googled it. So I googled something like effective altruism Zurich, because that was the city I was living at that point. And then a local group came up and they had this announcement of like, or they were running an impact seminar, they called it. With the description, it's like, it gets you exposed to different ideas, gives you a bit an overview of the field. And then I applied, signed up for it and got started with it, and step by step learned more and more. Did like follow-up seminar, fellowship. Soon then also there are also conferences, 2-3 global ones, and also saw a couple of more local ones. And then I started to attend the global conferences and was very amazed by the energy that was around. All these people super excited on doing something good, on very open to talk to. You can also easily talk to quite senior people there. And what I also liked is that at these conferences, so they say you should put an emphasis on talking to people. There's also some workshops and discussion groups that you can attend, but they say really put the focus on one-on-ones, because that's where you get the most out of. And yeah, completely true. I had then, I think for the first time on the weekend, 6 or 7 one-on-ones. Then
what was the most impressive / high-level person you've spoken to?
I talked to quite a few interesting and high-level people at OpenAI.
All right. Sam
Entropic.
Altman?
No, I think he was not there.
He's also part of the effective altruism movement, or?
Could be. I
okay.
don't know exactly. For me, it was more
Sam Altman is the founder of...
Yeah, I know him.
I'm just going to say it because I don't know if people know him.
Yeah.
He's the founder of one, or maybe not founder, but the president right now of OpenAI.
Yeah, exactly.
OpenAI is in
San Francisco.
And are they an open source platform?
I mean, they have an API.
Okay.
So if you want to interact with their models, they have an API. I think also due to kind of safety considerations, because the models are super powerful, so they want to kind of closely monitor and see how people use it, and also ramp it up slowly, because it's very hard. I mean, of course, you do a lot of research and work with the models and train the models, but it's very hard to see on what it's really capable of and how people use it. And with only their API access, so you can kind of send in a prompt, a text, what you want to do or something, and then it gives you the output, but you don't see what happens in between. Just also that not just someone can copy it and use it.
What are the kind of doomsday or negative scenarios? What would happen if this system got unleashed or got into the wrong hands?
So one big problem is kind of hate speech or racism that could be present in the model. So you train the models on quite a lot of data, Wikipedia and a lot of extra text data. And and they also do put a lot of effort into cleaning the data, trying to remove all these things, but it's just at that size and volume not anymore possible. So that's something they also have steps included to try to filter out if something like that gets produced by the model. So what someone could do is just use it as a bot and start harassing people online. It's massively scalable, so you can harass thousands or millions of people or produce fake information. And I think
dangerous stuff. Especially on the internet. If this becomes suddenly creates millions of bots that kind of start posting on Reddit, Twitter.
Yeah. I think there was a couple of years back. And also, I think this summer again from Microsoft, they released a chatbot kind of in the open. And then, very soon it picked up, racism and all these kind of things you don't want. And then they needed to shut it down quite quickly.
Okay, well, how did it pick up racism in the first place?
Yeah, you just put it out and then... I don't know, somehow...
Or reads comments from people.
Yeah, a lot of people started to interact with it that maybe for fun tried to put these things into it. Maybe they really had
That's
these
interesting
ideas.
about our nature, right? We get this incredible tool, and then we start putting in dumb prompts or shit that's going to be offensive just to see what happens.
Yeah.
I wonder what that says about us as as a species.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're kind of in the movement, you're exposed to the right people, getting inspired, and I guess there is the path of academia, right, open for you. there's a path of, I mean, it's probably still not, it wasn't back then like that big of a field yet. Even now it's like the beginning, even though a lot of cool things are happening in the AI space. How do you, what was your game plan? Or like, cause like now you have the right motivation. Yeah,
for me, like back then it was not clear on how I can get into the field. So like, I mean, very often they work now with large language models to work on the topics I want to work on. But like in my studies, like I did more like generally machine learning, deep learning, but not so much focused on language processing. That's only something I built over like the last 2 years, where I did a lot of side projects. So initially it was not clear for me on how I even get into the field. And then I think why I now chose that the path that I've chosen is, so I worked as a product manager for the past 2.5 years in startups. So I was like very much exposed to like startup environment, entrepreneurship. And in the movement, like it's a very academia driven movement. So it's like, originated from Oxford, Cambridge and the Bay Area. So a lot of thinkers in there, which is also very good. But I had the feeling that maybe there could be also more done applied.
So a lot of thinkers, not enough doers.
Yeah, I mean, now it seems a bit of changing, but naturally you also find like a lot of students, PhD students and stuff there. And I thought like me with my background in like product management, entrepreneurship, the interest in the technology, technical background, maybe like the career path I can have like a very high impact. And I also seem to enjoy is entrepreneurship. And
why? Like, what is entrepreneurship for you? Because you mentioned a lot of like side projects also. I was wondering like, what is a side project in the end? Because if it's on the side, what are you doing with the rest of your time? And why are you doing it full time?
Yeah, that was the same thinking I had. And that's also what led me to quitting the job. Because I did it I enjoyed working as a product manager, like for the strategic things and like uncertain environments, and you need to figure out things and build something. Also,
learning the processes and like being able to, or like learning how to work in a team, how to be also probably a leader. Like you have your squad, you planning sprints.
Exactly. And on the side, I did this like side projects where usually you get kind of a challenge. So one was a challenge from Facebook about hateful memes. So they had the problem that, or they have the problem that if someone uploads a meme, they need to classify is it hateful or not. And I did kind of these challenges. So you got a lot of memes and you needed to build a classifier for that. And I also love that, like the building of things.
Yeah, I looked into that a little bit. I just, because there's like a blog post on Facebook or like Meta about like that challenge, and the memes like don't seem that like, they gave examples of like, oh, this would be a hateful meme. I was like, really? Like, how do you even, how did you approach the problem? Or like, it's also probably like very culture context dependent, right?
Yeah. And maybe that's one differentiation between entrepreneurship and the side projects. And the side projects kind of, the scope or setup was given. So you have, so you had a data set of images, of memes, and you had kind of the classification for it, like is it hateful or not? And you needed to learn the mapping. But you didn't need to think yourself on like, okay, what's a good data set and what's now the labeling for each one. And that's how that went. And I think for entrepreneurship, you much more also need probably to think about these things, like what's the problem that I want to solve? Like how do I scope it? Who's the target customer I want to serve? What's the solution?
What is the problem you're thinking of right now?
Still very early. So I'm currently exploring the AI safety field. So how can we contribute to the knowledge, ideally even the research on how to make AI go well? But I want to have a product. So like there have been now quite a few research organizations established that focus like very much on the research itself, but without a product. But I see so I really like to do product, and I hope there's a lot of value by like bringing the research you're doing today into the products today, and not like only doing it future based and hope that sometimes it helps, but also helps today. So I'm thinking on like how can I create a product today that is kind of useful, where it also makes sense to do research on AI safety. Like I also don't want to have like a kind of an artificial just trying to merge it together, but organically that it makes sense to combine.
I was also wondering because it is a like deep tech, like AI. It seems like it's like there are few large incumbents in the field that have these massive models and the capability to, and it's still very early days in the field. It's not like you're building a B2B SaaS startup where like you just build some little tool that's going to help with like having a cooler email like interface like Superhuman, right? So how do you get embedded? Like, I assume it's pretty hard to get in, or it's not that as easy. You're like, oh, I have this thing. I know how to add a little bit of value into the whole AI space, and that's gonna provide me with a market that's like in the billions and attract a lot of venture capital.
Yeah, I guess that's a tricky part about
It's almost kind of like what you described of like being dependent on like the European Space Agency, and that's how it's kind of slow-ish and bureaucratic. Different case, but I see certain similarities. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. So my thoughts on that. So like one thing I observed is like that people working in the field, they're super open to talk to. So like it's not like it's comparatively easy to get connections to someone at OpenAI, at Anthropic, at DeepMind and talk with these people because like they're super passionate about the topic, about helping others. So like access to experts is not that difficult. And I think now, like at least the next few steps is like really talking to these people that have been in the field for quite a long time, that know also very well what's going on in these big research labs, and see what can we add to the picture with a product that they usually don't have. But I think that will be now a lot of kind of exploration and...
So it's more like, okay, you're working on these massive problems, and you already have so many dependencies and like you cannot focus on every aspect of this field. I'm here with my small team or my co-founder. We see this little problem that could add value to the bigger picture. Let's solve it together. Would you, like, if they offered you, like, okay, we see this, you're the right person to do this, we want you to be our internal consultant, or do you want to build, like, your own company? Or, like, in terms of, like, just your level of, not necessarily ambition, maybe ambition, how does it build into this effective altruism part where do you really want to build like your own massive, global champion in terms of like some AI, like the next Google, or you don't really care as long as this furthers the efforts and like makes AI a bigger thing and more important thing and part of our lives and improves human lives in general?
I think the second one, like that's also what brought me into entrepreneur. Like I also applied to companies. I had offers there. I could join Entrepreneur First. I was applying to PhDs, but then I evaluated, like, given my interest and my background and my experience both in like research during my grad studies, product management, like where can I have the biggest impact? And for me, that was and still is entrepreneurship. I think especially because I have this additional experience as a product manager that not too many peoples who are like research affine tend to have. And I think they also can create more values than just by being an internal consultant to one of the organizations.
And why do you need a co-founder though? Like, because if it's the latter, and if it's like, okay, let's make AI a big thing, and it's like, let's make all of us better off. Not being a consultant, okay. Being an entrepreneur, yes. But it might turn off like your potential partner, where like they'll be like, oh, but I want to build the next Google. Like I want to be, like you don't know what people's motivations are. It might be like I want to be filthy rich or have this like massive impact. And there's also like this question of ego and maybe you don't need a co-founder. Maybe like being this internal consultant or like working on your own where you're kind of an entrepreneur but not really is the perfect middle ground for you. No?
Like I see a lot of value in having a co-founder. like especially if you wanna build something bigger. I mean, yes, I see the case, like if you just want to be a consultant or like do something small, then probably you can be on your own. But I mean, even then it's good to have like mentors and coaches. And I really see the value, like, I mean, there are exactly a lot of reasons why a co-founder might be useful. Like you have a sparring partner, you have someone who joins you on the journey, because there's always ups, sometimes downs, and it's good to have like someone with you. Then like skill set, like impossible that you cover everything by yourself. So having someone who can take on other things that you maybe are a bit weaker in, and vice versa, seems to be very useful. And then for sure also kind of to share the good parts or the excitement around the journey. I mean, that's something that always gave me a lot of energy, like talking to someone and like sharing an excitement or a good story
Having a
together.
sparring partner.
Yeah.
So what's the vision if someone is like is listening to this and they're thinking of working for you, or maybe not, but they might hear what you have to say. Like, what exactly do you want to build, or what's like, why are you dedicating your time and potentially your whole life to this? What's the journey?
Yeah. Like, yeah, maybe first, like, so for me, it's a very important problem. Like, I'm not saying that, like, for sure, AI poses an existential risk, but there is a risk to it. Like, there's a certain probability that it's not zero, that it's the case. And the stakes are so high that even if that probability is low, we should work on that.
Totally, like ex machina or like shit like this.
Yes, exactly. And then, yeah, what I really want to do and fill in is like doing good research and good work on that, but also make it accessible to society today via a product. Like not doing this like very advanced research for like what could happen in 10 or 20 years, which is like also very valuable. I don't deny that. But I think there are so many interesting insights from there, and we could much better leverage that already today for like making our products or the use of this technology safer, more ethical, better for society, and really establish there like a global player that...
I get that, but what is that? What do you have like an example, or like, what would that be like in terms of, is it like are you talking about a consumer product or?
Yeah, so an example of another company that is doing something similar is Odd. So what, maybe you know Elicit, like it's a search engine for research papers.
Okay. A Google Scholar kind of.
Yeah, but
better.
I guess better, yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. And they are actually like Odds, the organization behind, it's an AI safety research organization. So they think, so what they tackle is, so maybe at some point like problems get too big, like problems AI solve get too big for a human to evaluate, because it's like we cannot kind of keep that in the memory. But what you can do is like you can maybe subdivide it in sub-problems, and maybe again in sub-problems. And then these sub-problems you can easily evaluate and see if there's like the AI does the right thing, and then you observe on how it combines the sub-problems, the solutions of the sub-problems again to the big solution. And with that you have kind of scalable oversight, so you can make smarter system and still supervise it and make sure that nothing goes wrong, because you can now kind of observe the thinking in like smaller problems.
Got it. So it's like existing problem, like how do you research for, or how do you search for research papers, build a browser for that, and then how do you leverage AI technology to make it even better, and also make AI or train it in a way, this artificial intelligence model, so that it doesn't go rogue.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess you can also apply it to like cars. Interesting. I always ask because we got to wrap up. What it was the same parting question. What's your advice to people out there, or even to your younger self, or future self, or something, your life philosophy that you have, like kind of like a mantra that you have?
Yeah, I think now also reflecting a bit about the conversation, two things. So one is passion. Like, I mean, life is kind of short and ends at some point. So do something that you enjoy doing, and try to make there an impact. I think that's one advice. And the other one is, but I also leverage more and more, and that's like super useful for me, is like mentors. And like not paying someone to be your mentor, but like finding people that are genuinely interested in you and see something in you, and try to gain them as mentors to get second viewpoints on certain things, or to maybe sometimes understand on how they approach things. And I think that has been really
How do you
transforming.
do that? What's the secret sauce?
How to find them?
Yeah.
Yeah, after my studies, I was also like thinking on like how do I get them, and by now, like looking back, very organically. So from the first startup I worked at, I still have like two of the C-levels back then, like mentors and friends. So them I contact for decisions, or other people from my network that I run into at some, like that are more senior or advanced in their career that I am, but that I bumped into somewhere, or I somehow got to know them, and then at some point, like I think when I bumped into them or talked to them, like really felt like that they have an interest in talking to me and are interested in me as a person, and like vice versa. And then once I get into a situation where I think, now it maybe makes sense to get their viewpoint, then also actively reach out to them. And people are like generally super willing, like super interested in like talking and helping you.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And it's part of it is like maybe they're altruistic, but part of it also they know that, if I help this person, I might need them in the future. It's always a tit for tat. So that's, I mean, it's fair.
Yeah.
It's part of our nature. But I definitely can subscribe to both points. But the latter one, people really forget about the power of just message someone, like find them. Like odds are, worst thing that can happen, they won't reply, and like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
Yeah.
That's like the common saying. So,
and also be honest. Like it's not like if you then go into mentoring, it's not about like trying to sell yourself in the best possible light, because then you don't get anything out of it. Like really show your weaknesses, but also be clear what you expect from the conversation. That also helps them like to adapt to that. But for me, it was like I got the best feedback when I was like very honest about doubts or what stresses me, or like what bigger decision I have and why I'm uncertain about it, because then we can directly address that issue and not do like some general conversation around high level things.
So true. I made the mistake of not overselling myself a few times, so lesson learned. Listen to Roman. Yeah. Thank you, man. This is wonderful.
It was a pleasure.
Cheers.